The Turkish Prime Minister Recep Erdogan is the latest public figure to come out kicking and punching about social media websites on the internet. But is his anger justified? Well, joining me in the studio today is Dougal Thompson, who's the Director of Communications at the International Publishers Association. Dougal, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Thomas.
Now, I know you're also a former journalist at The Economist as well. Let me start by asking you this question, first of all. Is there a case to be made when people take to social media sites to vent their anger against public figures, in this case the Turkish Prime Minister, or should these figures take what's thrown at them and perhaps use that opportunity to justify their reasoning, perhaps show a bit that they're more transparent and maybe have a bit more integrity? What's the balance there, do you think?
If you're asking, is there a case to be made for reacting to criticism in social media by trying to shut it down, then I think there isn't. I just don't think it's feasible, for one thing, and that's what the events in Turkey have shown us. I mean, Erdogan announced this ban on Twitter because he was personally embarrassed and offended by some of the material that Turks were providing. But you can't just switch Twitter off. You can't switch the internet off. And very quickly after the ban was implemented, the Turks, who are a very internet-savvy young population, had found ways to circumvent it by changing their domain name system numbers, and Twitter traffic increased. So it makes a bit of a mockery of the situation. So if you're asking me, is it an advisable course of action for governments to try to turn off the internet, turn off Twitter, then no, because it doesn't work.
So, but I mean, do you think in Turkey's case, perhaps then, that there is a risk that social media sites are a big threat to the government?
I think that's very true. Social media is really the primary organ of communication nowadays, and it's especially important and vital in countries like Turkey, where the media mainstream, the TV channels and the newspapers are muzzled and censored, and it's only on social media that you can tune into these kind of conversations that in other countries there'd be a home for. On The Daily Show in the US, or Have I Got News for You in the UK, we can talk about political scandals and compromising behaviour of politicians. You can't do that in the mainstream media in countries like Turkey, and it's only through social media that these conversations can happen.
Although even Have I Got News for You is mildly scripted, I have to admit there. But I do see your point. You said to me previously, smart governments embrace the free flow of information, not ban it. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by this?
The information age is here to stay. Social media is here to stay. We may as well just accept that and decide if we want to see it as a good thing or a bad thing. Now, you can be like King Canute, trying to push back the tide like Erdogan in Turkey. It's not going to work. Governments should really try and use and see the advantages to social media. And there are two big ones. The first is that it's a wonderful engagement tool. And Harvard, among other people, have performed studies that showed that people who are active users on social media are much more likely to vote, and ultimately that sort of feeds through into them being responsible members of society. They're better informed, better educated. Surely a government has a vested interest in as much information circulating among its population as possible. So that's the first reason. The other reason is, we mustn't think that social media and Twitter is only being used by disaffected youths and protesters to coordinate riots and demonstrations. We are all using these social media channels. Business, now uses it as a fundamental part of sales and marketing strategies. It's almost the main channel to market now. What is a multinational investor going to think when they're weighing up places where they can invest about a country that tries to block off those channels to market?
One thing strikes me about this is that sometimes I sometimes feel that politicians will use television or they'll use media outlets as a way to just get their point across. But when they're given the opportunity to speak directly on a PC to the electorate, that requires a lot more focus, that you can't just have PR people saying, look, you've got to look like this, you've got to look like that. That there's an opportunity for some of these, well, to be fair, in most cases, fairly aging politicians who have to come to get up to date with new technology. They've got the chance to appeal straight to the voter, and they're slow to do it. Instead, we're getting these reactions. Perhaps it's quite a unique case, but we're getting this reaction, putting a front up saying we must ban Twitter, we must ban Facebook, when you know there's a great opportunity for them, but perhaps they're just not ready for it yet.
Yeah, that's true, but then the other thing to bear in mind with the Turkey case is that Erdogan was speaking to his electorate by making these threats to ban Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
His power base are the 70% of Turks who aren't connected to the internet. Now, I've talked about this young, cosmopolitan, urban, internet-savvy elite in Istanbul and Ankara who are working around the Twitter ban. Erdogan's power base are the people in the provinces who wouldn't know what Twitter is, if you mentioned it to him. So he's talking to his electorate in his own way through his own channels. But you're right, he's probably missing a trick by not talking to the people that are out there on Twitter, and that's still a big chunk of Turkey's population. It's one of the countries that tweets the most. If he did, wake up tomorrow and decide to embrace Twitter and start talking to Turks that way, the world would be a better place.
But instead he's giving a one-sided argument, as you said. Dougal, thank you very much for coming to the studio today. Again, these topics we're having recently actually have been great. We can talk about them for hours because there really is so much to break down there. But thank you for coming into the studio.
No problem.
That's all we've got time for on Friday here. We'll be back again on Monday next week for a whole plethora of interviews for you and updates. So please join us then. Until next time, though, bye-bye.